Hello, everyone, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. We're excited to have you here today for the webinar, Why Enterprise Search is the Next Great Tool for Government. Before we get started, we have just a couple housekeeping items. You'll notice right now all the lines are muted. We are recording this session, and in an effort to make that recording as clean as possible, we will keep the lines muted. If you have a question, though, we'll answer them later. And with that, I have to turn over to Terry to get started.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for spending part of your time today at this webinar, which is really one of the most exciting topics I've had for a webinar in a long time. Enterprise search is, I think, the next great tool for government. So today we are breaking this up into three parts. The first is a little bit of background, which shares some of my experience in government and why I was so excited about enterprise search. The second is to think about the challenge of being digital government and some of the implications of that, and you might argue some of the challenges we bring on ourselves as we try to move to being more digital. And then finally, how we can meet that challenge and maybe even go beyond it and see the challenge and the thought we're going to have today at the webinar as an opportunity for us to provide better government. So my world of government was largely in the state government level. And I think it's happened to all of us that the phone rings and it's somebody, and you can fill in the blanks. For me, it was the governor's office or sometimes the media, because on some days I was the PIO designee for my department. But it could be your council person, a commissioner, a director, a legislator, a congressperson, a senator. And that phone call is a request for information, and therein lies the problem for government. And I think the question that we asked to start at this webinar is what happened next in your organization. In my organization, it would have kicked off a frantic runaround. My particular director was appointed by the governor, and that usually produces more stress when there are information requests coming in. And as it happened, we were sort of betwixt and between. This was a few years ago when we did have paper files, but we were starting to be much more digitally smart. So finding information in that entire digital landscape that we had created was very difficult for us. And perhaps you come to it from the same place. So think about what happens next in your organization when you get that call and when you have to find information. And that's a good starting point for today. As it turns out, our friends in the private sector have been studying this challenge a little bit. And the challenge is really that the volume of content that's being created is increasing. And I would argue that's because we don't have to get up from our desks anymore, go to a printer, pull it off a printer, go to a photocopying machine, and do all that kinds of stuff. We're creating content digitally a lot through email. And according to IDC, it might be an annual growth rate of 44-fold over the next decade. So obviously, things are in a certain place and they're getting worse every year from the perspective of finding that information and understanding what the volume of content is increasing. We also have a challenge around where the source of information and content is. As we increase the number of software solutions we use, remember I said we're going digital. As we find solutions, as we move away from paper, there are even more sources for us to search. So it's not going to a file cabinet, looking under the letter D and pulling out the folder anymore. It is looking at line of business applications, our email systems, our file servers, our custom applications, our SharePoint applications, perhaps your perceptive content repository, maybe it's Oracle or it's social media. So we've got many more sources, they're digital, and in many ways more complicated to search than an old-fashioned file cabinet. And on top of that, we have multiple access points. So people are using their desktops, although increasingly people are using their own devices, their smartphones or their tablets, and of course we have laptops. So that adds another exponential complexity to how we work out our strategy of dealing with information and finding the information we need when we need it with the device that we would prefer to use. So when you look at that part, that's the volume of what we create and how we get to it. But we also have this issue of hundreds of file types. So we may have systems that create proprietary content. We know we have PDFs. We know we have email formats. We know we have traditional word processing formats. So we have a lot of file types. And I have been around long enough to remember the days when you would try to open a file and you didn't have the right application to open it and you couldn't access the content that was in there. And in addition to that, of course, we have a lot of layers of security. And that in its way is good, but in another way, it creates technical obstacles that you're going to face when you try to access information that's been stored in a lot of different places. So the complexity is there, the issue of being able to access file types is there, the security is there, and the volume is increasing. So as you look at that, I think one of the things that we ask ourselves is, what is the effect of information overload of this type on our government organizations? This is important and I think particularly difficult for government because there's overall a lack of visibility of what's going on. And I think that that directly impacts our decision making and quite possibly the speed of our decisions. And it makes sense because if we're looking for the information that forms the basis of our decisions and we can't find it, that's a problem. The second thing, which is not an uncommon and not a new problem in government, is the lack of coordination. So there have always been coordinating committees and groups getting together in government where there was a need to unify and develop a way to move forward that may involve several agencies or several departments. But there's also the type of lack of coordination that happens when you don't see all the information that you need to make a decision. And in my day, it was bad enough that we had formal clearinghouse functions and staff to manage the coordination of applications for grants, for program and service creation, and other things that directly affected the efficacy of the programs and services that we were delivering in government. So information overload does not help us make better decision making in government. And so today we're asking ourselves, of course, what does this mean at a high level? I think at a high level, it's a coordination issue, it's a visibility issue, it's a transparency issue, it's an overload issue. But also, in more practical terms, it might be 10 to 15 hours a week per staff person or knowledge worker, as they say in the industry, because they are searching for the information that they need to do their job. In that scenario, knowing that many of us maybe are understaffed or could use staff in different ways if we had better tools, that 10 to 15 hours a week has a direct impact on the programs and services that we offer and the way that we deal with our constituents. So it's something to consider that there's both a high-level issue for government and there is this more granular day-to-day what it's like to work in government issue and to feel overloaded and overworked based on losing time. So the more digital tools we use, the more we complicate our ability to apply and absorb that information that we're producing at record-breaking rates. And in addition to that, the time we're spending searching for information adds no value to our decisions or to the services that we are providing to our constituents. And I think that is the single greatest reason for us to be looking for this type of tool, because if we are spending time on something in government that neither makes better decisions nor better service, we have to correct that. So that's kind of a high-level conversation, but if you take it down to a departmental level, you think about your programs and your service delivery, you can start to pull apart the risks of what it means to have too much information that's hard to find. And you start with this issue of staff time and backlogs. That directly goes to slower process and slower decisions. And as you sit there today, you may have certain departments that are under some pressure to move faster. And later we'll talk about some use cases that can help with that. But staff time and backlogs are one issue when we can't find the information we need. Of course, we already talked about the fact that program delivery suffers. At a top level consideration, if you don't have timely information, you're not making the best decisions in government. That's problematic. Another piece that we haven't really covered yet is this issue of compliance. The enterprise search tool that we're talking about today has a lot of applications across all kinds of organizations. In government, we have a couple of obligations around sensitive information or confidential information that we have to be taking care of, that we have to control access to. And in addition to that, as organizations that deliver programs and services, we also have the need for required documentation and information to be collected in the course of delivering those programs. And if you can't find the documentation and information that demonstrates your compliance with the rules of those programs, and typically these rules come to us from federal or state funders, then we have a problem. And making more and more content complicates the issue of finding the right documentation and makes it harder for us to produce that when we have auditors and programmatic visits, monitoring visits as we used to call them, in our organizations. I think at another level, in certain departments, having this information, having it hard to find, also impairs the strategic insight that we might get. Big data is really a part of that conversation where we are looking in government to have what's known as data-driven decisions, and we are trying to look at these bigger issues to better understand how we should move forward and what our strategic vision should be. Without being able to analyze the data we're collecting and the information we're storing and be able to find it and get it out in a meaningful way, we are not contributing much to that strategic insight that we may need as an organization and government. And I think this idea, and I love this phrase of accessibility walls, getting in the way of productivity. I mean, these are the things that would frustrate you when that phone would ring and you'd have to find information, but it's also related to our expectation now of what sort of device we're going to use in government. And so not being able to get the content we need on a mobile device, a smartphone, a tablet, or maybe a laptop, or if we're rovers, if we have remote locations, is a problem. And that's what they are referring to when they talk about accessibility walls. So there's a lot of contributors across this slide to the overall effect and the loss of productivity that we have in government because we can't use the information that we have. So with all that being said, now we sort of turn the conversation around to what can we do about it? How can we really attack these challenges and use Hyland's enterprise search tool to do it? So I think we've done a good job of talking about all the problems we have. So on the left side of the screen, you're looking at a big tangled mess of a problem. On the right side of the screen, the idea is that the solution, Hyland's enterprise search tool, being able to bring organization, superior searching, and device access to the problem is really the solution that we're here to talk about today. So first of all, imagine that you would be able to search all of those different locations that we talked about that you can see in little icons on the screen from a single interface. I like that. My job as an IT director used to be to help people learn the software that my department would invest in. Anytime I could simplify something like their search capability, I was going to be better liked than I was because I'm making it easier for them to be effective. And the worst times and the worst days in my department would be when we had to find information that we couldn't get to easily. In addition to that, the enterprise search has a certain refinement and dynamic category tool piece. And I guess the best way I could describe this is to say that it's really using English, and it's not as complex as some of the more, I would say, common tools I've seen for extreme or advanced searching. So it really lets people refine on things that they understand. And then finally, that you are able to get that information out of the search in a number of ways so it can really lead to some sort of actionable intelligence and results for the organization. So I can do the search from one place, I can do it in language with some related tools that I understand, and I'm able to execute and get it out of there in a way that's useful for me. So if you're using Enterprise Search, you can connect to all of your content. So those of you listening out there that are using Perceptive Content as a repository, you can connect to that. A number of other content repositories can be hit with this search tool, including things like email systems, your network shares, your intranets, your websites, your databases, your social media, and coming on the roadmap in the future, your on-base repository as well. So one of the things that's great about this solution is it's really searching the things that you may not have successfully gotten into your Perceptive Content repository, that you may not have in your on-base repository, that you can also hit your Perceptive Content repository, and all the other things that have not been stored in a traditional ECM or content services platform. In addition to that, there are options to connect from desktop, from remote browsers, and also from web-enabled smartphones and tablets. So I think this extends the use of something like Enterprise Search to people's preferred devices. And this is another one of those things where if you are an IT director, this allows you to deliver a great tool in a way that your users will really appreciate. And also importantly, to be able to help with your mobile and field workers who may need to search for information. And I think it's especially important to think about that use case, because when you go out into the field to do your work, you may not know what information would become important to you as you start out, as you leave the office. And in the old days, we'd throw the files under our arm and we'd go out and go to a site, and if we didn't have the right file, we couldn't take action. This kind of a tool from any device changes that math and makes fieldwork even more productive. And I think this is also very important. In my department, we would manage grants that could have a 35-year period of monitoring by my department. As you see things get older, and you may not be maintaining all the licenses you need. So the Enterprise Search tool has the ability to view results regardless of what format it's stored in. And I think that's really important because we may not be maintaining licenses to all of the content creators that were a part of this now content pile that we're trying to search. So being able to hit regardless of format is a nice piece. In addition to that, it's nice because it brings that stuff all together in one location in a single place to search with a very easy tool set to use in front of that single user. So very important to have the ability to sort of ignore the format of how the content is stored. You don't need the native app to view it, and it's a high definition rendering, so easier to read on the screen, which is very important when people are scanning. And you get results thumbnails, which is nice when you have to scan through a large amount of pages or results and you need to jump to the one that is most relevant for you. So I mentioned this idea of being able to get the information out, and it wouldn't be uncommon for us in government to invest in a solution that wasn't very friendly to us in terms of reporting. One of the great things about Enterprise Search is it has a lot of ways to distribute and report out. And you're looking at some of those on the screen. You can have access to the original documents. You can generate a results report, which can create a spreadsheet of information about a given result set. You could extract original documents. You can export hit highlighted documents. So imagine that someone's gone through with the highlighter and shown you all of the places in those documents that meet the search terms that you've been using. And through Enterprise Search, that is converting or can convert to a hit highlighted PDF. You can convert to a new format. You can convert to PDFs and TIFFs. You can use HTML5. You can flag and tag results. And you can also submit the results to a Perceptive workflow if you need to have something trigger in that workflow using the search results. So a nice set of distribution, and reporting capabilities available. So with that kind of quick overview of features and functionalities, why should government be considering enterprise search? This is the part where we talk about some of the really effective uses of this. I'm a girl that likes gadgets, and I'm excited when I get new tools. But for us in government, it's very important for us to consider the return on investment. So we have to look for ways using technology to reclaim staff time and boost our productivity. I mean, that's the entire point of having technology, is that we are more productive. And I think the key piece here is what we talked about, that 10 to 15 hours a day where staff will no longer waste their valuable time searching for answers. We are looking and have to increase the effectiveness of our programs and services. And that requires us to get complete information. And that can run the entire gamut, from the very practical example of someone in front of you applying for a human services piece, and you need to better understand all the things that that applicant could qualify for that could help and support them, to the ability to understand patterns in law enforcement activities. There's a number of reasons why having complete information can change the effectiveness of your organization. I also think you need to consider getting effective tools for your compliance responsibilities, because we now have legal responsibilities around sensitive and confidential information, sometimes called PII, and it can be tracked and monitored regularly. Enterprise search can run automatically to help you manage and track what is going on in your network and the many sources of content. In addition to that, you're able to produce the required documentation, information, and content that we often need for audits and to meet different kinds of requests from our funders. And I think when all of that is said and done, depending on what type of agency you have, what your mission is, being able to empower your staff to make better decisions wherever they are is important. I think I referenced field work. The more that your organization has workers in the field that have to go and inspect or evaluate or do things like this, the more sense this tool makes. And that ability to have mobile search from any device at any time is an important piece of that. But I also think having one interface to do this search that has a very powerful, more conversational, human-friendly way to do searches and realize relationships between information is another way to empower your staff, because you're giving them a more meaningful tool, and they can search a lot of repositories and document types at once by learning one solution. So let's talk about some very specific ways that we can use enterprise search for government. The first slide that I have is a little bit, I'm being a little funny with the title, but find it. And in my world, we used to research issues. We looked at a lot of past contracts. We awarded grants to cities and counties, and we often needed to look back at information that had been developed over multiple years to make a decision. And we would have compliance periods of 7 to 35 years. And being able to research it, to access multiple data repositories from a single place, to classify the content so I could figure out, did I need to look for Word documents? Did I need to look for PDFs? Am I most likely to find the information I need in a specific format? That's great for the research issues that we face in government. I also like this idea that I could enhance my website search capabilities. We all developed websites in government. We continue to develop websites. They get bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. And being able to provide search and navigation on your website, or maybe your own intranet, is a logical thing to do in a world that's gotten more and more digital, and we're not even sure anymore how many web pages we have on our websites and what all is out there for information. So imagine when someone comes to use that website, how happy they would be to have a better search tool. And I also think it leaves us with a really nice option as IT directors, because if you have search capability that can hit any number of repositories, that can open that content without needing a native viewer, then you can leave that content where it is when you migrate to new systems. This avoids some costs, perhaps, in terms of migrating data. It saves you time, and it makes you more agile. So enterprise search provides users with access to content in legacy systems without you needing to maintain those licenses. And that may be one of the strongest ROI moments you'll have in having something like enterprise search as part of your toolkit. So that last point was very interesting from an IT standpoint, but I also see a lot of tool potential for your information technology department. So being able to manage your data migration a little better, whether that's ensuring end user access to content during the migration, or maybe indexing your archives and better understanding them to reduce the cost of migration, whether it's some database offloading that you might be doing, which would give you some kind of ability to full text search databases, do things that would allow you to prevent performance strain on your processing power, and just generally being able to simplify and enrich access to database content are the kind of things that give your IT department some tools that they don't have. And I think that these things contribute both time and cost reduction to your overall IT strategy as you're migrating databases and content. I would say that if there was a single reason why government organizations need enterprise search, it would be the evolving and ever-growing, escalating number of FOIA or public records requests that we're seeing. Most of the studies that I've looked at from individual states show exponential growth in the number of requests, and disproportionately, in most cases, falling on local government, so smaller organizations with maybe not a full-time person to manage public records requests. And so the challenge of searching and identifying relevant records, using search tools that you can point to demonstrate the completeness of the search, being able to go across departments and agencies and gather from any source and use things like built-in actions to collect and redact content, would that make sense, are all pieces that go directly to the amount of time that people spend dealing with public records requests. And we have estimates from our own surveys that suggest something like 260 minutes a day spent on average. Now, obviously, there are some organizations that get more of these requests than others, but when you look systemically across government, it is consuming a significant amount of time. And if your organization happens to be the 10 to 15 hours a week per staff person loss of finding information, plus you're getting an escalating number of public records and it's taking 260 minutes a day to deal with that, you don't have a lot of time left to deliver the services and pursue the mission of your organization. So as I said, this is one place that absolutely has to be in your thought process around enterprise search and whether it makes sense for you. And to look at these bullet points again, imagine that you get a request and think about how those requests are often phrased. People that request records from government don't think about how we're organized by department. They see it as more of an issue piece, like what are the records around why that contract was let? That could implicate your procurement department. It could implicate your legal department. It could look to the department that's doing the contracting. And how do you today demonstrate that you found all the relevant records, that you've conducted in good faith a complete search, and that the request packet that you are now handing back to that requester is as complete as it can be? That's a difficult problem when people request things that blur the lines between departments and are issues and decisions that involve many people in your organization. And I think the ability to show completeness of search and to jump across all those departments with people managing things that could be public records in a lot of different ways is reason enough to consider enterprise search. But it also helps you show that you are meeting the legal responsibilities that you have in your jurisdiction, because you're able to demonstrate how you found it and you yourselves internally can be more sure that you're finding all the relevant records that you need to produce. So public records is an important piece of what we have to do, but we also have other responsibilities around compliance. There's certainly risk for us, and there's continuing threats with cybersecurity issues and generally the security obligations we have around the information that we hold. And we've all seen those headlines. Using enterprise search for something like confidential information discovery, it really provides you with the ability to create and manage automated queries that can go out and see what is being stored for content, and allowing you to understand if you've got any content that's being held in a way that's either unauthorized or less than secure, or is allowing access to more people than should have access to that information. So think of enterprise security, enterprise search as running part of your security organization by managing automated queries and running them, by being able to proactively monitor desktop and enterprise content for sensitive data. So if there is an issue, you're identifying it and probably can address with training for those staff people, but you've got a proactive tool to do that. That you can reactively do something that we would rather not talk about, which is to understand if there's been a data loss or breach, and that you can reactively take a look at where that information was stored and better assess whether it's been accessed. That you can ensure appropriate oversight of PII, which is personal information, and hopefully in the long run prevent any sort of accidental or intentional misuse of data, because if you identify data that falls into one of the categories that we really need to manage and monitor better, we put it in a different place. We figure out where it's going using enterprise search now, and we are able to address that and put it in a better place. So when you look at this slide, you're thinking of things that are both proactive and hopefully never having to use reactive kinds of tools that can allow us to basically create a more secure organization when it comes to our information, and also to ensure that we're addressing any situations where we're not meeting our legal responsibilities for managing the type of data that we create and the content that we're creating. And I think that that also is a very essential piece of your consideration as to whether you use enterprise search or not in your organization. So with all that being said today, this webinar was really intended to give you a look at enterprise search, which is a hugely powerful tool. And it's something that's very new to our on-base end users, probably less new to our content end users out listening, but we wanted to be sure that you understood what it was. And there are a number of resources out at hyland.com/enterprise-search for you to read and consider, to think about how this tool might fit in to what you're doing. If you like what you've seen, please reach out to your account manager for a live demonstration. It's one of the most magical and interesting pieces of software I've ever seen, and I think you would really be surprised and impressed with how much it could do for your organization. With that being said, thank you for your time today. My name is Terry Jones. You can reach me at this email address and also find the information at hyland.com. Thanks very much.